Alright, today we're going to do the area of parallelograms, triangles, and trapezoids. They give you 3 different formulas, so make sure you're paying attention. Make sure you understand which goes with which. This is the area of a parallelogram, and it's just the base times the height. It's a lot like rectangles and squares where you take the length times the width, except they don't call it length and width because they don't have right angles, or at least they don't always. And in case they don't have right angles, you always go with the height which has a right angle. Okay? If they don't have all 4 right angles, then the length and the width, you don't use these slanting sides. What you use is the base and the height, which always touch the right angle. The base and the height always touch the right angle. Okay? That's how you know which one's which. What they'll do is they'll give you all the sides, and you have to figure out which one's the base and which one's the height. Okay? The base is usually the longest one, okay, but it has to be touching the right angle. Sometimes that's not the one touching the right angle, so that wouldn't be the base. But this is the area of a parallelogram. It's the base times the height. So write these down. Alright, so this one's easy. They tell you what the base and height are, and that's all they tell you. Okay? It doesn't matter the order. You could do base times height or height times base. Okay? The base is 16. The height is 11. Okay? We take 11 times 16. You get 176. Now this is an area. It's a square unit because you're taking inches times inches. So the unit for area is inches squared. I will count it wrong if you leave the unit off, or if you have the unit wrong. It is inches squared because it's a two-dimensional. Area is two-dimensional. It's length times width, or in this case, base times height. You're taking inches times inches. Now here, you have to decide which one's your base, which one's your height, and which one do I not need. Now the base and height always touch a right angle. That would be these two. So I take 16.7 times 8.3. You get 138.61, which will probably say round in there is tenth. So 0.6. And this is centimeters squared because it's centimeters times centimeters. It's two-dimensional, so you got to have a square unit. Any questions? So here they give you the area of a parallelogram. It says it's 156 meters squared, and they tell you the base. So what you need to do is write the formula, which is area of a parallelogram is base times height. Plug in what you know. I find this is the best way to get this right, is plug in what I know. I know the area is 156. I know the base is 13. I'm trying to find the height. So I divide by 13 to get h by itself. 156 divided by 13, does anyone know? It is 12. Now the question is, what's my units? Is it meters squared or is it meters? It is meters. Height and base are a linear unit, meaning it's one direction. It's not two-dimensional. So it's always meters, or feet, or centimeters. It's not a square unit. Base and height are not square units. Area is a square unit. Alright, write this down. Alright, this is the next formula they give you. This is area of a triangle. And it's known as half of the base times the height. Half of the base times the height. Or I like to say it's this. The base times height divided by 2, because that's the exact same thing. I like to do base times height and then divide it by 2. Some people like to take half of the base times the height. Some of the people like to take half the height times the base. It doesn't matter. You'll get the same number. Okay? But again, the base and height. The base is always touching the right angle and the height is always touching the right angle. The height doesn't necessarily have to be on the inside. Sometimes it's on the outside. That's okay. Right? It tells us the two numbers we need to know. Alright. Write this down. Alright, so we have a triangle here. The base is 5.2, the height's 8. Okay, or it could be the other way around. If it's flipped, it doesn't really matter. So my formula for area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2, or half of the base times height. So plug in what you know. 8 is my height and base, 5.2 is the other one, and I divide it by 2. Now you can do it a couple different ways. You could do 8 times 5.2, which is 41.6, and divide that by 2 and get 20.8. Or you can do a half of 8, which is 4. 4 times 5.2, guess what that gives you? 20.8. And it's a square unit, so it's meters squared. That's your answer. Alright, you're supposed to find the area of this triangle. Okay, so always write down your formula. I find that when you write down the formula first, you get it right more often than not. Then just going throwing up numbers. Because that's anybody that got it wrong, I noticed they didn't write out the formula, they just threw out numbers and thought, oh, I times these and I'm good. But if you write down the formula, which is base times height divided by 2, you don't forget the last step. Which I noticed 7 people forgot the last step. Okay, you write down a formula, you don't forget that step. The base and height are 15 and 12. You never use these two sides. Okay, you never use those. You always use the one that's touching a right angle. The one that's always touching your height. So 15 and 12 divided by 2. Now, a lot of people did 15 times 12 and got 180, divided by 2 and they got 90. That's fine. Or you could divide 12 by 2 and get 6. 6 times 15 is, guess what? 90. Same thing as 15 times 12 divided by 2. Okay? It's 90. So my unit is 90 feet squared. Now some of you didn't write the units. That would be wrong. Okay, I didn't tell you that, but make sure you're writing your units. It's feet squared. Any questions? Write this down. Here's the formula for area of a trapezoid. Okay, this is a little bit different than all the others, so don't get confused. Half of the base 1 plus base 2 times the height. What that means is you take the sum of the bases, you add base 1 and base 2. All right, the bases are the two parallel sides. A trapezoid only has a pair of parallel sides. So you add base 1 and base 2. Okay, you times it with the height, and then divide it by 2. So, let's do this problem. So, write down the formula for area of a trapezoid. It's half of the bases added up. The sum of the bases times the height. So, a half of the base 1 plus base 2 times the height. My base 1 and base 2 is 8 and 17. The parallel sides are the bases. So, 8 plus 17... I times it by 2 because that's my height, and then I divide it by 2. What's 8 plus 17? 25. So I take 25 times 2 and I divide it by 2. Or in this case, I could just cancel out the 2's. What's my answer? 25. What's my units? Inches squared. It's a square unit. Okay? 25 times 2 is 50. 50 divided by 2 is 25. So you can just cancel the 2's out. Any questions? Right? Make sure you know exactly which one you need to use. Right? You know what a parallelogram is, you know what a trapezoid is, you know what a triangle looks like. Do not use triangle for a parallelogram. Don't use the formula for a trapezoid for a triangle. Someone's already tried to do that. Do not confuse the formulas. Here's your homework.